Spectrovision Radio.
According to 50 years of MUFON data, the two most prominent alien encounters are between humans and gray aliens and humans and Nordic aliens. About 80% of all encounters fall within these two groups. The most striking thing is that these might not be aliens at all. There is mounting evidence that what we're encountering with the Grays and the Nordics are future humans that are coming back to affect timelines for a different outcome. Now, sticking with this theory that the Grays and the Nordics are actually future humans, this shows us a mirror of two different outcomes, and that we could possibly be at the bifurcation point in humanity where we select which road we go down. On one side, you have the gray aliens. They seem to be synthetic biological hybrids. They seem to have augmented themselves to the point of no return, where they have lost their natural fertility. They've lost their natural spiritual connection to source. They have lost their soul. They're hive-minded. They're emotionless. They're cold. They're clinical. Then on the other side, you have the activated beings. When people encounter these Nordics, they talk about them as angelic, as glowing, bright, empathetic, loving, caring, more like guides, helping them along spiritually. So what we have now is a bifurcation of the human path that can take us to the augmented or the activated outcome. As Friedrich Nietzsche, the great German philosopher, laid out when he highlighted the difference between the Übermensch and the last men, this could be the defining point in the human journey. And as Friedrich Nietzsche also said, humanity is something to overcome, that this is a bridge between the past and the future. So then I ask you, what type of future would you rather have? Let's discuss augmented versus activated. Hello friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Conscious Observers. Today's is gonna be a very interesting episode because we're gonna touch on aliens in a way that most people don't ever even think about. That what we call aliens, the vast majority, might have a very terrestrial explanation and origin. Now, this is something that really kind of disturbs a lot of people because we've been raised with the notion that aliens come from very far away. You know, all the Independence Day movies and all the Mars attacks and War of the Worlds, these are very far off creatures from distant planets that on the day-to-day don't really pose any sort of a threat, don't really affect us in any way or interact with us, but every once in a while, they might get in their little spaceships and come here and cause some havoc, right? But generally speaking, we don't have to worry about them. They're very far away. What if that's not the case? What if they're here and have always been here and that they're actually different forms of us? Now, I'm not saying that there are no extraterrestrials on other planets out there. I mean, it's a very, very big cosmos, and that's only what we can see. I'm a firm believer that 99% of the universe is invisible, is non-physical by nature. And we've just begun to map that out. And even the physical part, we have really no idea how far it is, how far it goes, and what's really out there. So I'm in no way saying that there's not extraterrestrial beings on other planets and that they have no way to get here and interact with us. I'm sure that is a thing. But according to the MUFON data, MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network. They've been around for decades. They have over 50 years of compiled data, tens of thousands of reports. And they're basically like the investigators. Anytime there's a crash or an encounter or a sighting or an abduction or a visitation, anything like that, you can go and you can submit a report to MUFON the same way you would submit a police report of a crime. And they compile all this. They send out investigators. They, ask questions. They log it. They do all their things. And they can pour through all this data because they have more data in this, field than anybody else, period. And when you look at the MUFON data, I mean, you cannot ignore this. The vast majority of quote unquote alien encounters are between humans and Nordics and humans and Grays. There, of course, are interactions with other beings, the mantis, the reptilians, all sorts of beings out there, but they're in the minority. So today we're going to focus on these two, because I think these two are far more important to humanity than the other ones. I think the other ones are important, but obviously let's focus on the majority. There's something there, and I think it's different than you're thinking. So let's break down each type, first of all. We'll start with the Grays. So the Grays are the most reported being in abduction and encounter experiences. It just is. It's the most common one that people see. And I think a big reason for that is they don't respect our free will. They don't respect our privacy. They don't respect, our cultures. They have a mission to do. They are hive-minded, so there's usually multiple of them. You'll rarely see just one Gray. It's usually a team of them, 3 or 4, and they seem to work together. The vast majority of experiencers that have an encounter with the Grays talk about how they seem to be there to collect either mental consciousness data and information or genetic information. They're directly tied to all the stories of the hybridization programs. It's reported very, very frequently by people that they get the impression that they are having trouble reproducing, having trouble with their health. Maybe they're a dying arm of the species. They can't reproduce naturally. They seem to be coming back. Most of the interpretations are they're coming back in time. They're not traveling here from other places. They're actually coming back in time to save themselves, that they need something that humans have, whether it's our connection to source, our consciousness connection to the higher self. This is the human self. The higher self is in the spirit realm, the non-physical realm, and that they maybe have severed that tie through augmentation, and that they need that. The experiences with the Grays seems to be interpersonal in the sense that, yes, they come and they get genetic information and genetic material and samples, but they also get inside people's minds, get inside people's dreams, get inside people's fears. They seem to be sort of trying to figure out, reverse engineer the soul component, the consciousness component, the spirituality component, while at the same time taking, genetic samples, taking sperms and eggs and things like that. They're obviously have a plan. They're doing something with all of this. And, you can look at it in all sorts of different ways. Like maybe they're taking this stuff off planet to create another human type species. Maybe they are creating human clones. Maybe they're creating human hybrids. Maybe they're just trying to save themselves, using us as like a CRISPR, trying to like genetically modify themselves for survival. I don't know the answer there. There's any number of theories, but the evidence, the proof is overwhelming. The Gray aliens are directly interacting with humans, period. We know this. Now, there's a ton of evidence that suggests that they are future humans. So if you look at the Gray, you think, okay, how did we end up like that, right? They have a mouth, they have ears, they have fingers and toes, the head, 2 arms, 2 legs, they're usually described as 3 to 4 feet tall, big eyes, huge bulging head. So you look at it and you say, okay, it kind of looks like a human, right? But we wouldn't have evolved quite that way. There's a guy named Michael Masters. He does an amazing job. He's an anthropologist, and he actually saw the cover of Whitley Strieber's book Communion one time and said, oh my God, that is a future human. Like if we keep evolving the way we're evolving, jawline shrinking, head growing, body shrinking, all these things. Eventually, way down the road, we'll get to this point. And I totally see that. I see where it's coming from. He's a brilliant guy and written several books. And I definitely think that the Greys do suggest that they are a future evolutional version of humans. But it also seems like there is a hybridization component, that they have merged with machines at some point, that they seem to be synthetically enhanced, not purely biological. Because you can just look at them and tell, I mean, that is a very, humans have not evolved that much. I mean, human beings have been around for a very long time, hundreds of thousands of years, maybe over 1 million years, we're finding out now, that humans in this form have been around for a very long time. And we have not evolved that much. So for us to turn into the Greys would take millions of years of evolution, or some sort of a engineering enhancement along the way. And it's not hard to really fathom this. I mean, look where we are right now in our world with augmentation, Neuralink, AI, all of the things. I mean, they're already starting to produce, robots en masse. They're already talking about having robots that can grow other robots in artificial wombs. I mean, there's so much happening right now. Just extrapolate out dozens of years or hundreds of years or thousands of years, and things are going to look very, very different than they look now. And now if you speed this up millions of years, there's no telling. So maybe we do evolve just naturally into this gray alien, but it really seems to me that at a certain point, the biological human merges with a synthetic form and possibly is even birthed from a synthetic womb, and that is what produces the gray. And the gray would literally be a synthetic, inorganic version of a biological organic human that mixes the DNA and the genetics of both, and you have what we call a gray alien. Now, I call this Homo syntheticus. It's actually like a proposed theory of, a bifurcation evolutionary path of Homo sapiens. And it seems like that is what we're looking at. They have some traits and characteristics and biologics of human beings, and then many that we can't really explain or define because it's coming from a world that hasn't really been invented yet. It's coming from this synthetic artificial intelligent world. So these Greys could possibly be coming back to find out what it means to be a human. Like, it's almost like going back to their ancestral family tree. Like, oh, we're part human. Let's go back to when humans were really in their heyday. And, if you look at the abduction phenomenon, the heyday for that was like in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Like, that's when abductions were really popping off. And if you think about it, that was sort of humans' heyday. Like our lifespan was the longest that it probably ever had been. It's before we introduced so many of the GMOs and so much of the things now that seem to be disrupting our hormones, disrupting our fertility, disrupting our thoughts and our consciousness. There's so much going on now that is sort of degrading the human vehicle, whereas 50 years ago, we were more pure. People seemed to be healthier and happier and definitely lived a lot longer and weren't on as many pharmaceuticals and things like that. So it seems like that was a really good time to come back and, sample, analyze, study the human being. Also, we didn't have cameras everywhere and, our houses weren't bugged the way they are now and that kind of stuff. So you could get away with a lot more, poking and prodding and abductions and that kind of stuff. So that to me perfectly explains why that time period was the peak of the abduction phenomenon and sort of what the Greys are doing. They're clinically, surgically coming back in time to gather the genetic and consciousness information that they need to probably save their species. So we see that. The data supports that. The anecdotal, experiential, testimonies support that. And that kind of makes sense. I could see that. Okay, so then we'll shift over to the Nordics. And not everyone likes this word, Nordics. I didn't come up with it. It's just what is kind of used because a lot of these beings have this Northern European look. They're kind of tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin. They just sort of have that Nordic look. Now, before we dive into what the Nordics are, let's first discuss this. Let's discuss the appearance, because I don't want anybody in any way to misconstrue this and think that I'm having any sort of a racial, filter on this because I'm blonde hair and blue eyes. That has nothing to do with anything. This is MUFON data. This is what people describe. And there's actually a very rational biological and evolutionary reason for the fact that they look the way that they look. If you think about it, so the Nordics have not necessarily blonde hair, they have pale hair. A lot of times it's described as like silvery or white. And their skin isn't described as like white, like Caucasian white. It's described as pale, almost translucent. And their eyes are bigger and often described as piercing, glowing, just the brightest blue you've ever seen. Now, all three of these traits, the bright blue eyes, the pale hair, and the pale skin, are results of a lack of melanin, okay? So if you were to take the melanin out of your body completely, melanin is the dark pigment in the skin that helps to reflect and protect from the radiation from the sun. So if you are in a place that doesn't have any sun, say you're in a spaceship, or say you're in the ocean in a craft, or say you're inside the earth, and you are not subjected to the sun for very long periods of time, I'm talking thousands of years, millions of years, evolutionarily, you won't need to produce melanin anymore, because why would you? And in fact, it's actually an advantage to have less melanin because it helps your body naturally synthesize vitamin D. So the more melanin you have, the harder it is to synthesize vitamin D from the sun. The less melanin, which is why people in like Nordic areas have less melanin, because they have less sunlight and they need to be able to naturally produce more sunlight. And people in like near the equator in Africa, a place like that, where you have much more sunlight and you're outside in the sun a lot more and it's sunnier just in general more, you can have more melanin to protect you from the sun, and you'll still get the same amount of vitamin D because you're just in more sun. So what we see with the Nordics is not white people. We see pale people. We see people that don't have melanin because they don't need it, and it's actually in their favor to have less melanin so they can produce more vitamin D naturally. Now, why are the eyes blue? This is super interesting because the eyes are blue, not because they're actually blue, they're blue because they lack melanin. And when you lack melanin, the light scatters around the iris and it makes them blue. The same reason the sky is blue. The sky is blue because it scatters light, not because it's actually blue. That's just what our eyes determine. So the Nordics don't have blue eyes. We just see blue eyes because we're seeing the scattering light because they don't have melanin in their iris. So all those physical traits are just explained very simply that way. It's not a racial thing. There's a very good chance that where they're from in the future, there is no race. There's a very good chance that everybody looks kind of like that. It's not a racial thing. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I think that's important. And I also think it's super fascinating because I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and I didn't realize this, but I'm in the vast minority of humans on Earth that most people have dark hair, dark eyes. And that it's something like 5% or something of the population actually has blonde hair and blue eyes. And I just thought that was wild. I didn't know that. And also, as best they can tell, it's a very new part of humanity that up until about 11,000 years ago, nobody had blue hair or blonde hair and blue eyes. It wasn't a thing. Everyone had dark hair and dark eyes, or some variation of. And that the blonde hair and blue eyes is a new and rare genetic trait for humanity. It's an evolutionary thing. It's something we're learning as we're spending more time indoors, we're spending more time in cold places, that it's just a way for humans to adapt to the environment. There's also signs that it could be genetically engineered. This all is happening at the same time as the last reset event, kind of the Younger Dryas period, where it seems like a lot of genetic modifications might have happened. That's for another video. I won't get into that here. But going back to the Nordics. So they are often described almost the opposite of the Grays. Whereas we talk about the Grays as being hive-minded, there's multiple of them, they work together, they're cold, they're quiet, they don't really communicate, they're like doing stuff to people and they don't really tell you what they're doing. You ask them questions, they don't answer. They seem to be robotic, they seem to be on a mission, very surgical. Kind of like when you're in a hospital and there's like a doctor, he might not be the warmest, nicest person, but he's on a mission. He's there to save your life, and he'll probably save your life, but he's not gonna like make you all warm and fuzzy. That's not his job. He's in work mode. It seems like that's how these Greys are. They're in work mode. And the Nordics seem to be the opposite. They don't come and really like steal our genetics and abuse us and stuff the same way the Greys do. They seem to usually appear and offer messages of hope and guidance, usually telling us things like, you know, clean up the environment, stop messing with nukes, you know, get your act together, you know, in a kind of a warm guidance type of a way, almost as if they have a vested interest in this place and they don't want us to destroy the place, you know, almost as if they live here too, you know, and they're looking out for us. So they seem to be more empathetic. People talk about when they look into their eyes, they feel compassion, they feel warmth, you know. It's almost as if we went back to like the caveman days, they would see us as gods, you know, and we wouldn't really know how to help them per se, right? Because we speak different languages, their cultures are totally different, they don't have technology, none of the stuff that we really do to help other humans, we could really help them, even though we'd want to. So say you could go back to the caveman days and there was a caveman that was sick or struggling, you know, or confused or sad or something, you would feel for him. You know, you would look him in the eyes and be like, man, I'm sorry. Like, I wish I could help. I wish there was more I could do. You would have that empathy in your heart and they would be able to see that in your eyes. But it would be really hard for you to physically help them. They'd be scared of you. They wouldn't know who you are, what you are, and the tools that we have to offer to help wouldn't really work for them. It's just, we're incompatible, even though we're both humans on Earth. So if you think about these Nordics as future humans, you know, people say, why don't they come down here and cure cancer? Why don't they come down here and help us? It's like, well, this is a free will simulator and we're working through our issues and our problems. We're learning, we're problem solving. And they know they're not supposed to impede on our free will. And I think that they do help in certain ways, that they are guiding and they are helping. And who knows how many things they've protected us from that we're unaware of. There's lots of anecdotal reports of them saving us many times from many different things to sustain our species in this timeline. But they don't like come out and take credit. They're like, hey guys, there was a big rock headed right toward y'all and we diverted it. You're welcome. They do what they got to do. But you know, people talk about how when they are in their presence, they feel very spiritual. They feel connected, that they just appear angelic. And I think this is where the biblical angels and these stories come from. They see these beings. The beings offer telepathic insight, communication. Sometimes they do heal. Sometimes they do help physically. But a lot of times it's just, they can just appear and you just feel this warmth and love, and it gives you hope and inspiration that there's something out there, somebody out there watching and who cares. Something beyond us, bigger than us, is there, right outside of our perceptual fence. And that's a lot of times all the Nordics need to do, is just appear, just show themselves, and it changes everything. So I think that they are helping, just in indirect ways, and maybe direct ways that we just can't see. So you have these two encounters. Obviously the Greys encounter more, because like I said earlier, they don't really have boundaries, you know, they just do what they got to do, whereas the Nordics tend to be more in the background, and it's more rare for them to directly, you know, make themselves seen, because they don't want to cause butterfly effects and ripples. They understand their role in all this, but that they are there and they are seen fairly often. So let's just assume that these two beings are future paths, future potential outcomes of humanity. And we can use the teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche, or at least his philosophical thoughts on humanity and the bifurcation that's happening right now. And it's pretty easy to look around and see that we are at this tipping point. I mean, there's so many singularity type events coming at once. You know, we're starting to think about colonizing space. We're having way more interactions with interdimensionals and extraterrestrials and spiritual beings. We're having this almost singularity event coming up real quickly with artificial intelligence. As we move towards artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, it's making people think more about what it means to be human. We're starting to augment ourselves through things like Neuralink, implants. We're starting to degrade our DNA and the genetics of the human being through things like microplastics, radiation from all of our devices, and you know, all the things that we're doing that are harming us and hurting us, that are having a cumulative effect, and we're passing that down through our genetics to the next generations. And we're starting to see this change in human beings. We're starting to see a change in our physical, composure, and also in the way that we view the world, in the way that we view government, in the way that we view existence. I mean, people are starting to go through like an existential crisis. Who are we? Where are we? Why are we here? And as robots start to take over more and more jobs, as AI starts to, basically downsize, industry after industry, and people are going to be left without jobs. And so many people identify their purpose in life with whatever their job is. Oh, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm a truck driver, whatever. And that's not the point. That's not the point of life. The point of life is not to be your career. I mean, you have to have a career to provide for your family and to contribute to the global society, but that's not who you are. So I think we're about to go through this transformational period where people have more time on their hands, whether they want to or not, to think and to find purpose. And this is going to drive some people mad, but I think overall it's really good for humanity, because what we need to do is figure out who we really are as a soul, not as a human avatar. And I think that as we start doing less and less grunt work and menial tasks, and we start to give our minds more freedom and time to explore what it really means to be who you are and why you're here, I think that that's going to create this spiritual explosion and awakening. I hope. Now, here's where the bifurcation comes in. People that are scared of this or run from this will opt for the augmentation path, because if you can take a pill and make those thoughts go away, or if you can implant something into you and give you a certain ability, if you don't have to do the shadow work, you can just drink or take something, to avoid these things that make humans, like emotions and fears and desires and guilt and forgiveness and all of the things that we need to be addressing, the things that are inside of you and that we're suppressing like a jack-in-the-box and we're just keeping it down. Eventually it's going to explode into your face. That's what it does. But in this wild world of technology, what if there's a way to just make all that go away? What if you can just put on your metaverse headset and just escape all of this stuff, all of the human stuff? I think that's one path. And that's what Friedrich Nietzsche talked about when he described the last men. The last men were people that craved comfort. And they craved comfort and safety at the expense of personal development and risk-taking. They were very risk adverse. They would rather just sit there in their nice comfy chair and have the government spoon feed them everything that they needed, and they would gladly give away their freedoms and their personal identity for that safety and that comfort. And this is the last men that Friedrich Nietzsche talked about 150 years ago or so. And we're starting to see that. In this day of convenience and technology, it's so easy to just glide through life and not really take any chances, not really figure out who you are, not do any shadow work, not really, live. You can just coast. But I don't think that's why we're here. In fact, I know that's not why we're here. We come here with a very specific intention and purpose. This is a training grounds for your soul. And it's like going to the gym. You put more weight on the bar because the more you lift, the stronger you become. That resistance is what grows you. So we come here to face adversity and to overcome it, to teach ourselves what we're made of. So the more that we skip out on that, and the more that we avoid that, and the more that we augment ourselves to where we don't have to have those adversities, I think that when you do that at the expense of personal development and growth, spiritual growth, that's how we go the augmented path. A shallow, hollow, cold, soulless, scared, fear-based, non-human path. We give away our freedoms, we give away our self-expression and identity for the safety net and security that the government can provide. That is not a good outcome. And when I look at the Grays and the Nordics, I see Grays there. I see Grays having given that away, having lost their fertility, lost their spiritual connection, lost their identity. Who are they? What are they? Are they synthetic? Are they biological? Are they human? Are they alien? Like, what are they? No one really knows. I don't know if they know. And I think they're coming back to try to figure that out. They're climbing their family tree, trying to find the branch that takes them back to their salvation. That's what they're doing. And when we see this, it should serve as a wake-up call to us to not go down that path. So then what is the other path? Well, when we look at what Friedrich Nietzsche called the Übermensch, which translates to Superman, not the Superman we see in the comics, that's actually more of a physical Superman, right? If you've seen the Superman movies, he's not very spiritually evolved. It's a physical thing. Leaps tall buildings in a single bound, right? Very strong and tough. That was the Western adaptation. But what Friedrich Nietzsche talked about with Übermensch was this being that was the opposite of the last man. It was a fully activated human being that was fully autonomous, that didn't need the government, didn't want handouts, didn't want to be spoon-fed, wanted to go and get everything that it needed and wanted. It took pride in itself. It was evolved, and it was very spiritually, consciously, and internally balanced. It did the inner work, the shadow work. It looked inside before it went outside. So it's not a Luddite. It's not someone who shuns technology. It doesn't mean that you have to be a Buddhist monk and, sit on a hilltop and meditate 12 hours a day. It's not about that. It's about using technology as an enhancement after you've done the inner work. So once you're completely, fully activated as a human being, then it's okay to sort of layer on particular things that might help you accomplish more, because now you have the emotional and the spiritual maturity and stability to handle it. You're not using it as a crutch or a band-aid. You're using it as an enhancement, which is what its purpose is. Even when people talk about the Nordics still fly around in flying saucers, right? They're very often seen in saucers. They tend to have certain technological devices, and they tend to use technology, but they don't use it primarily. They use it secondarily. Like they communicate telepathically. They can heal with their mind. They can manifest with their thoughts. They don't need a machine to help them and to do that. But there's certain things that they can't do, like fly through space. So of course they have technology for that. So I think it's all about balance. And when I see the Nordics, they're not coming to steal stuff from us and to take advantage of us. It seems like they're coming to offer guidance and assistance and wisdom. And that is a characteristic of a higher consciousness being, a being that's not there to take. It's not service to self, it's service to others. And you don't see that with the Grays. The Grays are about survival. Me, me, me. They need, they take, they want. And that's completely opposite of what you see with the Nordics. Whereas the Nordics are basically communicating, we're good, now we want to make sure you're good. We're worried about you guys, And if we go the route of the Übermensch, the route of the Superman, the route of the sovereign individual who is fully activated, and we're able to really see what the human being is capable of, oh my God, like who knows what we're going to be? And when I see these Nordics, how could you not aspire to be one? You're talking about beings that are 6 to 7 feet tall, often described as beautiful, as glowing, as radiant, loving, telepathic. They present themselves with a stature of confidence, but not force, but power. They have a power and a strength to them, but not in this like egotistical, shallow way. They're not like dominating, they're caring and they're loving, but they still project this power and authority. And it seems like they have just completely activated all the human centers. It's like we're a house with all of our lights turned off and they've turned all the lights on and they're just fully activated. And that's why to us they appear as angelic, they appear supernatural, and that's why we call them aliens, because what else are we going to call them? It reminds me of like the cargo cults, from back in World War II when we were landing our jets in these remote islands And when we would land our jets there and we would make the runways and all that, the natives there had never seen jets. They'd never seen soldiers. They'd never seen airmen. They'd never seen people using technology, radios, walkie-talkies. They'd never seen any of this heavy machinery. So they immediately thought that these humans were either aliens or gods, or in a lot of cases, devils. So the humans, the airmen, would give them gifts, cigarettes and candy and food and things like this. And then they would take off and they'd go on their missions. And then when they would come back, you know, days, weeks, months later to land on the same airfield, was usually just a little strip of dirt that they, you know, paved out on this tropical island somewhere in the middle of the ocean. They would find effigies. They would find that these natives were building, you know, mock like air traffic control towers and mock effigies of the airmen and things like this, because they thought that those airmen were gods, were literal gods that were bringing them gifts from the gods. And they were creating these effigies and these monuments to try to attract the sky gods back down to give them more cigarettes and food and stuff like this. So here you have two different humans. These aren't different species. These aren't even from different time periods. These are two different humans on Earth at the exact same time, interacting with each other, and one human thinks the other human is a god because their technology and their appearance is so radically foreign and alien to the other one that they think the other one is an alien or a god or a devil. Now, if two humans on Earth coexisting at the exact same time can look at the other one and think the other one is an alien or a god, imagine what we would think if we saw a human from 100 years from now, with the pace of technological development right now. But imagine if we saw a human from 1,000 years from now. Imagine if we saw a human from 1,000,000 years from now. What would we think of that human? Imagine, just as a thought exercise, that you went back 100 years, 100 years, with everything that you have, all the technology, the clothes, everything you have, you went back 100 years, just to 1925. That's not that long ago, guys. Now imagine you were there and you were able to display, to show off, to demonstrate our technology, what you have. Imagine you took a robot back. We have robots right now. Figure, Tesla's robot. We have full-size humanoid robots that are AI powered that can take commands from you, drive your car, help you out around the house, all else. Imagine you went back to 1925 with your robot friend and your cell phone, and you just displayed it, demonstrated it to passerbys on the street. Their heads would explode. That's 100 years. Imagine you went back 1,000 years. What do you think those people 1,000 years ago would think of you? Do you think they would embrace you? Do you think they would say, "Oh, show me more, lovely human"? Or would they think that you are some sort of a black magic sorcerer or a demonic entity, or obviously an alien from a faraway planet? So you see where I'm going with this. These beings that we're seeing, these Grays and these Nordics, that account for 80% of encounters with beings, how there's a very good chance they're not aliens. I mean, you got to think about it this way. Why do they care about us? Why would some alien from some faraway planet care about us? The only logical reason they would care about us is if either they share this home with us, that's the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, and there's a lot of evidence that they do, and or they are us. And either they are guiding us, manipulating us, or overseeing us the way a big brother would. And when you look at things that way, it makes the UFO topic much more complicated. It explains the stalling of disclosure because possibly they don't know how to explain this. I mean, it's easy to explain, hey, see that star way over there? There's a planet that orbits that star and there's some aliens on it. And every once in a while they fly their little craft here and buzz through our skies and say hello. People will be like, okay, that lines up with all the video games and the comic books and the movies throughout my life. Okay, no big deal. I understand that. But to say, okay, you see all these aliens here interacting with us? Those aren't aliens. Those are future humans. And maybe things didn't go so good in the future, and they're coming back to change things, to help, to edit, to carry out agendas, maybe all of the above. Then it poses the question, okay, well, what happens in the future that brings them back here? Where did things go wrong? Where did we get off track? And can they save us? Can they correct this? And are they each trying to do two different things? Is one pulling us this way and the other is pulling us this way? In that case, which direction do we go? Who do we trust? What do we do? These are all valid questions. These are the questions we should be asking when we look at the UFO and alien phenomenon. And that's why I made this video, because I really think that we are at this tipping point, this bifurcation point, this fork in the road, where our two biggest choices, if you just look at the data, is augmented versus activated, period. So which way are we going to go? Which way are you going to go? These are the questions that we all need to be asking ourselves. And we can look at the Nordics and the Grays as two, just whether they're real or not, whether any of the stuff I said is factual or not, or whether it's just archetypal, illusory, dream world stuff. We can still use it as a metaphor, as a clear example of two different possible outcomes. I know what the true human potential is, and it is so much more than we're doing right now. So much more, it's not even funny. We're probably using 20% of our actual human potential. So we have a long way to go to become fully activated human beings, and I think that's exciting. I'm not depressed by that. I see so much potential. I see so much growth. I see so many possibilities. Oh my God, could you imagine if you were only 20% developed and you knew that you had 80% ceiling, that you had 80% more room to grow? I think that's immensely exciting. It gives you hope, gives you motivation, inspiration to do more, because you're not at the top of your game. You're nowhere close. But there's this potential. You can get there. It is possible. Now there's all these possibilities that have arisen that maybe you didn't even know were possible. Are you telling me that I can be telepathic? Are you telling me that I can heal my body with my thoughts? Are you telling me that I can one day be these angelic beings that people report seeing? These caring, loving, nurturing, enlightened beings? That I can be that? Are you kidding me? Let's go, baby. What are we doing here? What we're doing here is we're getting there. This is our path. We're learning. But I also see the dark side. That's what the Grays represent. Things can go terribly wrong, and that's what Nietzsche was telling us about a long time ago. The Übermensch and the last men are two possibilities. The probabilities are determined by our current free will decisions. Every decision that we make every single day either lowers our vibratory state or raises it. It either takes us closer to the augmented path or closer to the activated path. Every single day, we are either evolving or devolving. Every single day, we're working towards one of these outcomes at an individual level and a collective level, period. So I do this video today to illustrate the two possible paths: augmented versus activated, Grays versus Nordics, last men versus Übermensch. I want to do my part to individually self-master my own vessel, my own consciousness, overcome my own fears and adversities, and to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be, while also at the same time contributing to the collective and the ascension of the collective consciousness, because I do feel that we are at this tipping point of a mass spiritual awakening that, just like I talked about in a previous video of a personal spiritual awakening, how you walk a fine line between psychosis and enlightenment. I think at a collective level, we also have to toe that line, and that a mass awakening, if done at the wrong time, prematurely, or too abruptly, can have catastrophic consequences. Whereas if it's done at the right time, it can propel us forward in ways that will surpass probably thousands of years of evolution in maybe a matter of days. And I think that's where we're at. I think we're so close to this tipping point, this catalyst for our consciousness development. But we have to take it seriously, and we have to put in the work, the shadow work, the inner work. We have to get ourselves ready from the inside out. Stop worrying about outer space and go inner space. We don't need to colonize Mars. We need to master ourselves. And if we do this at an individual level and we teach the people around us to do the same thing, and we start doing this at a collective level, then when this mass awakening happens, it will be beautiful. And that's the road to the Übermensch. That's the road to the activated. That's the road to the Nordics. This is what I think. I would love to know your thoughts. Please leave me a comment. Please spread this video. Help me grow this channel. Help me get this message out. And of course, have a beautiful day, friends.